I had a dream that was more so a nightmare 2 days ago, where I guess I was home and then I decided to go cycling into a different suburb to explore, with, the main intention of exploring, right? And so I went over to this other suburb, which was near where I live. And so I was cycling around. I had my old 1980s road bike that I used to use quite a lot until I got whatever hybrid bike that I have now. But it's interesting, I was using that in the dream. However, I got there and I was roaming around, riding around the neighborhood, and then I decided to stop and dismount at a T-junction somewhere, where you have like the three-way of a, intersection in a suburban neighborhood, and this neighborhood was very flat in terms of its design. Honestly, kind of reminds me of the neighborhood ways from here that isn't quite as far as I imagined in the dream, but anyway, I was there, I dismounted, left my bike there, and I went with a camera, much like the one that I'm recording with now, exploring, and I ended up trespassing, essentially, behind someone's yard. And so I was sort of walking around, and then I ended up in this person's yard, and it was like forested. There was a sort of bench and table and whatnot there. It was kind of, just a normal kind of table and backyard or suburban house. Imagine like a 60s style suburban neighborhood as well. But I decided for some reason to leave my camera on the little backyard table that was in the backyard of that person's house, and they weren't home at the time, so at least from what I remember in the dream. And then I went through the fence, continued exploring the main roads of the suburb, deeper and deeper into this other side, and then the sun started to set. It started to get quite dark, and after a while it was just a lot of series of liminal spaces and unfamiliar homes that didn't appear to even be inhabited. I decided to return to my bike, and then I came back the way I retraced my steps, because I was actually getting kind of lost. And so eventually I came back after some, I guess, hours have passed, and the sun was setting, and I found that house again where I left my camera in the back, except there was a guy home, and he was raking leaves or picking up leaves, and he waved to me, and I waved back, nicely, but I did not know how else to say that I left my camera in his backyard without admitting to trespassing, so I felt like I just couldn't do that. In the dream, for some reason, I just sort of kept walking, and I was like, you know what, if I can just find my bike and go home, it'll be fine. I lost the camera, but it is what it is, I guess. I ended up back at the T-junction, and it was quite dark at this point. It was, civil twilight is what they would call it. And I got to that part of the T-junction where I believe that I left my bike, and I saw that there were two other bikes there that were parked, just sort of stood up on kickstands. And I was curious, but one of the bikes I went to inspect, which was white, similar to my road bike from the 80s. Mine was white with red text. This one was white with orange text. So, not my bike. I couldn't recognize it. The shape was different on the little, the body of the bike. It was wider, or thicker in terms of how it looked. It didn't look quite like just like a pipe or a set of pipes like on my bike. So I did, figured out it's not mine. And I looked at the other bike that was there, was not mine. I started to get a low blood sugar, or started feeling those symptoms, which is scary. And I decided to continue walking, and I just sort of roamed aimlessly trying to find my bike until the dream ended some time after that, but there was no real resolution. And so that's what I had as a dream too, a couple of days ago, a couple of nights ago. Quite uncomfortable. Yeah. So there's this other dream I had. Where I was trying to remember this now because it's a bit odd. There was like multiple different locations. It almost had like a fantasy setting with weird creatures that kept attacking me and all that. They were like these weird spider-like creatures that were quite large. There was like a shrine similar to something in the game Shadow of the Colossus, where there's a barren wasteland around it, and then there's the shrine of worship there. And so there's that. And then there was a bunch of those weird creatures. They kind of also resembled, if you've ever watched the show Code Lyoko, I think that's what it's called, which is that show that had like the 2D and 3D animations. There was like the virtual world or something, and there was like creatures, those creatures with like the gun arms, and then they would get up. They kind of look like kind of long leg things or whatever. That's kind of similar to what these look like, but they looked also like a hybrid of that and like a Colossus from Shadow of the Colossus. It was a weird thing. And I remember getting attacked by them, so it was a bit of an odd thing. And they were specifically located at this shrine at the front, kind of guarding it, almost like some Dark Souls level layout where you're going up these steps and there's enemies as you're trying to get into this location. So that happened over and over again. Felt like Dark Souls because I kept dying and retrying. And then there was this other location there that almost resembled like Sen's Fortress in Dark Souls, which was like this weird sort of fort or castle looking thing. There was the wall outside of it. It was like a circular kind of wall, or at least a wall, and then it extended onwards to like this field and this weird patchy area. And you had the actual fortress there, which was a maze of mine carts and railways going in and around, and like traps and stuff all over the inside of this thing. It very much was not a habitable or easily traversable thing, and I remember going through it quite quickly on like sky hooks and rails and things like that, in circles around it and through it, and on the walls surrounding it. That was kind of sandwiched in the dream somewhere. And then there was this other part of the dream when it started to end, or when it got to its sort of finishing sequence. So I think it was first that Sen's Fortress part, and then that creature part, and then eventually ended up in this recurring location, which is at it's sort of like at the end of the street that I grew up on. Basically all that, except with a field and not a road kind of connecting. It's like it is a road, but it's more of like a field and a railroad going across it. Imagine like you have the neighborhood here, and then here is where the, that other road would have connected to it. But instead of this road being a road and other housing, it was a forest with a clearing for a train. It's almost like a very little rail yard set of railways, and there was like a shack there that was kind of decrepit and old, but cozy in a way and welcoming. And so in this part of the dream it was dark, and every time I've had that dream before it was evening, or dusk or something, or late afternoon or something, where it was like the sun was getting to its end point of the day, but it wasn't quite there, so still quite, there was a lot of light out. But I had that sort of part of the dream before, but in this part, it was in this specific dream that I had, I guess a couple months ago. It was dark, and eventually I wandered wearily towards this shack, and there was not really much going on around. It was very desolate, and I went inside and found a bed, and there was a bed there. I was just kind of alone. I felt warmth underneath this quilt that was on the bed that was situated there, and I just sort of laid down and fell asleep there as the dream ended. And next thing I really remember is just, well, at least from the dream world in that night, it was nothing. It ended. So, just some ponderings of dreams that I have had, in, the first one being from a couple days ago, and then the second one that I described being from 2 months ago or so, maybe. What's interesting is both dreams had recurring locations. The one recurring location of that first dream was the neighborhood, because I've dreamed about it before, but it was dark. But this time it was like dusk, and then it became dark. And then the second dream, I dreamt about that little area where the shack was, in that forest, and the railroad. And I would explore that railroad on occasion, going up and down, in some dreams from the past, but it would always be dusk. But yeah, it was odd. So figured I'd talk about